Hello everyone, this is Hussein Rashad, talking from our course Distributed Antenna System from Planning to Acceptance. This is chapter 1. We are in the fifth session or the fifth lesson in section number 1. Section number 1, again, it's all about introduction about Distributed Antenna System. In first session, we knew the concept of DAS, what we mean by DAS, Distributed Antenna System, what is the concept of DAS, how it works, and why do we need DAS? Why do we need in-building solution inside the building? We also highlighted the main technical and commercial challenges for DAS deployment, and also we touched base the DAS ecosystem, the different companies who participate in DAS network as a mobile operator, as mobile vendors, as contractor, neutral host, system integrators, and we already knew the differences between all of these business models. We also mentioned the global market share among different DAS vendors like Comscope, Cobham, and we knew that the top five DAS vendors globally right now, Comscope, Cobham, GMA Wireless, and Corning. In this session, our last session in section number 1, it's about DAS project lifecycle. So, as an IPS DAS designer or a DAS installer or even DAS project manager, you should be careful about which stage you are at and which testing tools you require, what's needed from your side in each and every phase. Just to start from the left to the right, the first stage of the DAS deployment, which is called planning phase. We are at the planning phase. During the planning phase, usually the mobile operators start studying their market, start studying a certain area or a certain city, and they get their own business case or business study or case study, and they start analyzing the amount of revenue that they can win or they can achieve after a year, after 2 years. This is simply how it works. And then they do their analysis, and based on that analysis, they decide to implement a DAS network or not. You got my point? And during this phase as well, such operators they do planning for their network and before jumping into next or further steps. Sometimes during also the planning phase, you do first of all you do site survey. Site survey means you're going to you go in the field on the site or inside the building. You start study the profiles of the customers, like how many data they consume every month, how many voice calls they do every month, and what are their pain points. Do they face any challenges with the internet coverage or the cellular coverage inside the building? Do they do any kind of advanced online gaming? Do they do any kind of video streaming and so on? According to this study, mobile operators decide to deploy or to not deploy dedicated IPS solution. They might, for example, they might end up by just providing the cellular coverage from the macro side in some cases. So they need to do ROI analysis. They need to have a business case, a valid business case, in order to start investment in a certain area. Okay, and of course during the planning phase, also they do the capacity planning. They see simply how many customers they have inside the building and what are the type of their or the activities they are doing. Like I just mentioned, online gaming, streaming, phone calls, and so on. And based on that, they do their capacity planning. And during that phase as well, the mobile operators start issuing something called RFP, request for proposal. They request RFP from the mobile vendors, from different entities in the ecosystem that we just explained. They just float an RFP to all network equipment manufacturers, to mobile contractors, system integrators, mobile vendors, all entities in the DAS ecosystem. They float the RFP and start negotiating the RFP, and they start meeting with them, and then they agree on a certain project scope, or also they agree on budget and so on. This is typically done during the planning phase. Okay, during the second phase, which is the design phase. During the design phase, usually as a DAS designer or IPS designer, you need to do something called power sharing. It's simply power sharing. Of course, during the course, we're going to explain in more detail what we mean by power sharing and how we can do it. during the design phase, the IBS designer starts doing power sharing. Let's say you have power sharing, it's related for multi-operator solution. So if you have multi-operators and multi-technology in the same DAS network, let's say you are in Saudi and you are deploying a DAS network, and you have STC, Mobile, and Zain in the same network, participating or sharing the same network. So you need, and each of them, they have their own technologies. For example, STC, they need to deploy 3G and 4G. Mobile, they need to provide 5G. Zain, they need to provide 3G. Let's see just an example. So you need to divide the power rating of the BTS among all of these technology and among between all of these operators. This is called power sharing simply. And then during the design phase as well, the second step, you need to calculate or to analyze the KPIs. The KPIs, it stands for key performance indicators. You need to study your KPIs, your required KPIs. Sometimes, usually the mobile operators put a certain KPIs, and the whole companies participating in the project, they need to follow or to stick to the KPI. They need to achieve the KPIs. Okay, this is the target or the objective of the project or the project scope. KPIs simply like the RSSI, the RSRP, or the signal level, the power signal level. They need to analyze their signal to noise ratio. They need to understand what's required in every and each area inside the building, what's the handover criteria or handover KPIs, and so on. Also, during the design phase, we need to select which DAS type we're going to implement, we're going to deploy, whether it's passive DAS, active DAS, or hybrid DAS. You need to decide, and in most cases, the mobile operators or the mobile vendors, they request the system integrator or they request the company who is going to install the DAS network. They requested to stick to a certain DAS type. For example, they need to deploy passive, so the contractor is going to deploy passive DAS. That's all. And this is in most cases. And during the design phase as well, you start to build the initial design. Initial design on the DAS net, on the building itself. So you have the building, you have the AutoCAD file or the floor maps of the building. You start building initial DAS design based on your understanding, based on your experience. You start putting the components, you start connecting it together through cables, you start connecting your DAS components all in one network. This is called the initial design. After you put your initial design, you go on site, you go on field, and you need to conduct some measurements, some site measurements, just to understand the behavior of the RF environment there. You need to understand the fading, the attenuation, the path loss, and so on. From such measurements, you just collect it from site. You just use some certain instrument like spectrum analyzer, like drive test tools, like model calibration tools. You need just to collect such measurements from the field, and then you use it to calibrate or optimize your model, your RF propagation model that you just built on the planning tool. Okay, this is happened during the design phase. So usually in the design phase, you need to use a planning tool like IBWave or Ramplan or whatever planning tool you're using. You need to build your design on the planning tool. And in order to build your design on the planning tools, you need to have some inputs like the power sharing, like KPIs that you have, which DAS type you need to design, and you should have some measurements from the field. This is typically done during the design phase. The next phase is the installation phase of the network. During the installation phase, let's say you have an optimum design, and we're going to explain how to reach an optimum design later on in next sections. You have an optimum design ready to install on field, and you're going just to install your network. During installation phase, you do something called pre-build survey. This is very important. Pre-build survey, let's say you have a project, and the period or the duration of that project is like 1 year or 6 months, okay? And you start building your design at the first month, okay? And then after negotiation and after you finished your design, you stayed or you took like something 4 months, and then you need to go on site and to start installation, and you just surprised that they just changed some walls inside the building. They removed a partition or they removed some metal gates and so on. If they do any change in the building without notifying you, you need to visit the site. You need to do pre-build survey, and in order to just get the inputs from the site, get the proper or the actual structure of the building, and you need just to amend or modify your design based on that. This is what we mean by pre-build survey. During the installation phase as well, you handle all logistics like equipment, supplying the equipment, the cables, antennas, and you need to place your component like the antennas itself just below the ceiling or just on the wall if it's a directional antenna, and you need just to start routing your cables and so on. This is actually happened during the installation phase. So after installation phase, you go to the commissioning phase. During the commissioning phase, at this point your network is connected together, your cables, adapters, antennas, all connected together through a medium like coaxial cables or whatever. During commissioning phase, you are going to do continuity test. Like you need to make sure that everything is connected properly. There is no mismatching, there is no cut, there is no component failure, and so on. This is called the continuity test, and we're going also to explain the continuity test, how does it work, and which instruments you need to do continuity test. You need also to do uplink and downlink tuning. As you already know, as a telecom engineer, there is something called uplink and downlink. Uplink is the direction from a mobile user to a base station, and the downlink is the direction from the base station to the mobile users inside the building. So you need to tune your uplink and downlink. This tuning is it's part of it. It's a power tuning. You need to adjust or tune your power levels from in the uplink and downlink. You need also to adjust your sensitivity. There is something called sensitivity. And we're going to explain this later on in the next sections. After testing and after commissioning the network, during also the commissioning phase, you need to do RAN integration, radio access network integration. At this point, at this stage, the mobile vendors like Nokia, Ericsson, or Huawei, they just bring their BTS and start connecting their BTSs to the network, to the DAS network, and they start integrating their BTS to the network itself, and they start doing some measurements on the uplink and downlink. They start conducting some post-build survey just to make sure that the network is working according to the KPIs, according to the target KPIs required to achieve. And after that, as a contractor or as a system integrator, or even if you are a service company, you need to do site acceptance. Usually site acceptance happens with drive test tools like test phones, or it happens using scanner or spectrum analyzer to just walk around the building and start collecting the measurements. And you just need to compare the measurements with the KPIs, or you compare it with your design, with the numbers on your design. At this point, you need to make sure that you achieved the required KPIs. You need to make sure to your numbers up to the expectation, and you need to make sure that your design is optimum and it will provide the needed coverage and needed capacity to your customer. That's all for the DAS project lifecycle. During our course, during next sections, we're going to go in deep details of the DAS components. I mean, we're going to discuss all related components related to passive DAS, active DAS, and hybrid DAS. We're going to go into the DAS design itself, how to do design, how to do model calibration, and then how to optimize, and then after that, how to maintain and monitor your network. This is our course, a distributed antenna system course. Hopefully this lesson was helpful for you. Hopefully you learned something new, and see you in the next section, inshallah, and see you soon.